So all in favor of, well, first, I think we need to make a change to the minutes.
Okay, so I'd like to amend the minutes because listed in attendance is Director LeBlanc, and actually we had Assistant Director Aaron Chalufo. So I'd like to amend the minutes to reflect that attendance.
I'll second that.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Now, all in favor of the motion?
Aye.
Aye. Okay, motion passes. We have a public discussion period now. If anyone has anything they would like to discuss with us other than what the topic will be for the rest of the meeting. Toby?
Yes, Toby Arsenio, 95 Granite.
Can you go to the
Toby,
microphone,
yeah,
please?
could you go? Yeah, thank you.
Toby, is it working? No. Press this, press it. Okay, thank you. Toby
I got it.
Arsenio, I'm cursed, in case you don't know.
We always knew that.
Okay, any gadgetry, it will explode. Toby Arsenian, 95 Granite Street. You remember and probably didn't care for my remarks at the town meeting about the accounting for the Sewer Enterprise Fund. And I indeed copied you on my discovery. The letter I wrote to the Finance Committee copied to the Majesties and to you, the Commissioners, about the 2000 annual report and the town meeting articles I found there, one of which authorized the payment, appropriated the money for the Long Beach sewer, and the second article, ordered the creation of a Long Beach sewer district. And there was no response at the town meeting, and I think you need to put it on the agenda. I've looked in the bylaws, and there in Chapter 2, powers and duties of the selectmen under additional duties. I can't give you the citation out of my head, but it's number 19 with the small Roman numerals in a long list, is the requirement that they bring into effect votes of a town meeting, not phrased that way. So it's on their shoulders, but it's very definitely your bailiwick also, because you're responsible for the Sewer Enterprise Fund. And the fact that that town meeting vote has been ignored for 24 and a half years doesn't make it any better and doesn't make it go away. And I would ask that you get onto the Board of Selectmen and perhaps Town Council as well, and put it on an agenda for a later meeting. Could I have a response?
Sure, duly noted, and we will talk to the board.
To the Selectmen.
Yes.
I would suggest Town Council as well. Thank you.
Anyone else? Okay, so what I'd like to do is, the meeting today is really all about water and sewer, and we've got our consulting firm that's working with us to handle the situation here. And I'd like to introduce Bob Parsons, who's sitting over there. And Bob is the senior project manager with approximately 30 years of experience in civil infrastructure projects. And he works for, the firm is Tetra Tech, which is a worldwide multi-discipline civil engineering firm with over 27,000 employees worldwide. And if you read their, go out and look at their website, it's pretty impressive what they do in the area of water. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Bob and let him lead us in this. And we're not a big crowd, so I think we can ask questions as we go along. So let's try and get this all on the table. I'd also like to say this isn't complete yet. This is an interim report. And let me say a few other words. So, not this past town meeting, but the prior town meeting, annual town meeting, we got money for two different studies. One being looking at our water and sewer capacities. And then also, we had another study that's ongoing about water rates or sewer rates. And we will be dealing with that one at a later date. But for now, we're dealing with the water and sewer capacity issues.
Well, thank you very much. I appreciate you guys having me here tonight. Just for the purposes of, this is a presentation, but it's only 3 slides, and it's intended to be that way. It's concise. What we did with the support of DPW is collect a lot of data relative to your water and sewer systems. Reviewed the data, made some conclusions about status of both water and sewer systems. We tried to summarize the results the best we could in 3 slides. There's 2 water slides, 1 sewer slide. But know that a fair amount of information and data and review was performed as part of this, and there's draft memos and reports that we've prepared that we would love to get some comments back on and finalize. So with that, let me jump right in here. This slide represents, so the way that the water system, at least the way we approached it, you've got your raw water supply sources that feed your water treatment plant, treats the water, distributes it to your distribution system, your piping, your homes, your businesses, your commercial establishments. This slide's focused completely on the raw water, the water you pull from your reservoirs. And it's a sample size of, since 2013 to 2023, what you've pulled from your reservoirs and what is measured physically at the water treatment plant and remote locations like Carlson's Quarry, and what is reported annually to DEP. Mass DEP, and Aaron spearheads that for the town. You prepare annual statistical reports, which asks you to report on your raw water supply or quantity, and then what's distributed out into the distribution system. So this is data that's been provided to us. You have a fair amount of meters that are capturing this data. And the reason why we wanted to take a look at this is just to see what you've pulled from your raw water, just to kind of measure it against different metrics. The 2 that you see here is, that top line is the Water Management Act permit withdrawal limit. And the line below that is a 90% marker, which is not a formal marker. It's just something that I typically look at when we're looking at these types of things. And just to see how, it undulates a little bit, but it's generally been increasing over time. So again, just as one part of it, there's a lot of data to support this. And again, all the data that you'll see reflected in these slides is data we pulled from the town. Town does a lot of measuring of water, wastewater, and we were able to take this data and turn it into some summaries. So again, this is important because you want to see where you are relative to your withdrawal limit. You're not the only community that is in this range. It's fairly common. So again, just kind of track it and see where you are. The next piece of the puzzle is sort of what happens once it goes to your plant. So these bars, and this presentation is bars and graphs and all types, so I hope you'll like bars and graphs. But from 2017 to 2023, we were able to pull this data. And again, this is all included in reports that are distributed to Mass DEP as part of a regulatory requirement. I'll go through the colors. So the blue is what's metered. So all your homes and businesses and all these establishments have meters that read the amount of water that's being pulled, and that is obviously billed through your water bills. This is what's captured. This is how we capture this data. The orange piece and all of these sections are telling us what happens through the plant and when it leaves the plant. So we can kind of monitor it, see what's happening. It's a requirement from the state, but we like to watch this, and I'll get into some details. The orange is what your estimated usage is from municipal usage, and that's something, again, that Aaron monitors with folks from DPW in the water department. And it can be anything from flushing programs, when the town, there's a requirement to flush your water mains, to keep things moving, keep them fresh. That water's lost somehow, some way, so it's captured here. They monitor it, and we quantify it. I'm going to jump to the top because it's kind of leading up to the green. Green's probably the more important of these, but the gray top there is what you lose through your process. So let's say you drew in 10 gallons from your raw water supply. Through your water treatment process, you inherently lose water, meaning it's lost through a backwash cycle. It doesn't get lost into the ether. It actually goes back into your, through your lagoons back into your water supply. But that's water that's lost. So if 10 gallons enter and 8 leave, you're losing 2 gallons. In this particular case, you're losing thousands and thousands of gallons that way because that's just part of the process. It's not uncommon. And the balance that you see in green is what we consider unaccounted for water, which is water that you have no way of quantifying, and it falls into that sort of category of where does it go? There's places it goes, and we've talked a lot about this. Mass DEP's requirement to meet compliance is 10%. If you look at the published data, there's probably not a lot of communities that do meet the 10%, but it's an objective that everybody's trying to meet. Obviously, the less you're unaccounted for, the more you have for supply, the less use you're having, right? So we also wanted to see and follow how you guys the town has monitored water usage. That green area can be attributed to a lot of different things. One is your meters that you guys utilize in town are generally older than recommended life cycle. So you could be measuring a little bit different than what the actual usage is. Part of it could be through leaks in pipes, which I know the town has an active, or I think they're trying to put forward a leak detection program. And again, these numbers I've seen these numbers quite a bit in this range. And the objective really is to try to reduce that green, because that's water that you're not, there's no revenue for one, that you're pulling from your raw water supply. And that, over time, I like to kind of say you get that number like death by 1,000 cuts. It's very rare. It's one large break or anything like that. It's stuff that every city and town is trying to manage. So, I guess given the numbers that we're seeing, I think there's opportunities to improve. And again, every community can improve. In the document we prepared, we have recommendations, and some of it is just to make sure you have a robust leak detection program. Check your meters, which we have done as part of our program. We've tested meters. And we try to focus on the larger water users. The town's small, there's not a lot of industry, so it's I think your biggest water user is the water treatment plant, wastewater treatment plant, as a matter of fact. So we did focus on that, and American Water Works has a very stringent standard for meter testing. They allow you a 3% variance. So if you're not 100%, you have to be 98.5 low or 101.5 high. So there's a very narrow range. That's a very difficult metric to hit, but that is the metric. So I can say that the meters we did test were a bit off, but I think it's sort of, when we look at this data, and I have the benefit of having some senior staff that work with me. I have colleagues that worked at Mass DEP who are specialists in water supply, who did review this with me and Aaron. And what it appears is that it's likely a meter issue. Just early recommendations, perhaps meters need to be replaced or checked, or over time. I think that would be a benefit. And there's other recommendations that came out of there. So sure.
So the absolute number, that 28%?
Hey, Don, excuse me. You get the mic. Thank you. Say your name.
Don Southern, 33 Straightsmith. The absolute number is 28%. Is that right? I can't.
Yeah, 28% for 2023.
Okay,
Yes.
that's a big number. But the more important question is, how did it get from 12 to 28 in
It's
12 months? I mean, that's hard to believe it's meters.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think every year is different, and I think sometimes meters could read differently. It's tough to understand why things move in that bit of a range. We noticed that as well. But I don't know. Did you? Oh, I thought you said something.
It's the way the reporting is set up, so, prime example, 2022, we had the forest fires. And the tracking of luckily, they tracked the forest fire water usage. I can't make the fire department track water usage. So, in my opinion, based on my years of doing this, we were able to extrapolate the amount of water that was used during the forest fires, which therefore had us account for more water, therefore reducing our unaccounted for water. It's all a shell. I know I shouldn't say it this way. It's kind of a shell game with this reporting, because it's on how good your records are and how it gets reported. Does that make sense?
Seating?
Yeah, I don't think I need the microphone, but I'll use it anyway, as a courtesy to the deaf. Z Sepple on 92 Granite Street. We've been dealing with these water meter issues at least for 10 years or so that I've been going to DPW meetings. And there's one thing I would like to know, because obviously you're addressing these issues on a macro level. You're seeing what the total level of water going out of the plant is and what's being measured, as opposed to what the meters are telling you. But I'd like to know one thing, like, if you have to buy a new meter, does your meter go back to the town and be tested for accuracy so that you can say that your meter was good? You're paying for a new one even though you had an old one that was good. I mean, is there any individualized recording of who's got good meters and who's got lousy ones and who's paying for something they don't need as opposed to who should be paying for something that they do need?
Usually when a city or town decides to do a meter replacement program, it's city or town wide. And that's because you want like parts and materials and reading systems. My town just went to an AMR system, so everything's automatic. I think in some cases, meters that are known to be broken are replaced. And there's different ways when you look at, sometimes this is a desktop analysis where you look at more of the billing information and you can see, well, this home didn't use water for 3 or 4 months or 6 months. It's a bit of a red flag. So you can kind of pick some things out that way. And so some meters are replaced individually, but generally when you start to go to a system, I don't know how old your meters are, 15, 20 years, Aaron? Old?
A lot of them now at this point now are from the 1990s,
Okay.
so 30 years old.
And that's an older meter. And so what happens over time, meters lose their efficiency and effectiveness to read flows. Some do, some don't, but over time, when you have thousands of meters within a system, your system's relatively small. So to Aaron's point earlier, if you measured fire flows or you measured something differently one year, it could have an impact on what you see on the screen now. So relatively small system. But generally when a city or town decides they're going to upgrade their meters, it's typically city or town wide. So unless, of course, there's a known broken meter and there's extra spares, I'm sure you guys carry them, they'll be replaced. So.
Maybe time just flies faster than I thought. I don't know.
Tom Meeker, 73 Marmion Way. As a member of the planning board, I took a pretty deep dive into your report from 2022, and the data you're presenting today does not exactly agree on unaccounted for water. Several of the ones are off, maybe rounding error, maybe other things, but
Yep.
2021 is a big difference.
Yeah.
It was 25%, now you're showing 13. What happened?
Well, so Aaron and I had talked about this. We had read, I can get into some of the details. It was a consumption number versus a qualitative number that was used. So it did sway that number. And I can show you, what we do is we take this, we put it in a spreadsheet, and we look at all the numbers. So we're calculating it as we go. But that's what happened for that 1 year. The other ones that are off a percentage or two, probably a rounding thing. But yeah, the 2021 does show a large difference there, yeah.
So the
Noted.
sudden change was not in 2022, the sudden change was earlier.
I think it was identified as in the 20s for 2021, and now went to 13 or something like
Yeah.
that? Yeah, yes. Yeah, that was a change that, so what we wanted to do is be consistent with what was reported in the ASRs here, but that was the one that had a fairly sizable swing, yeah. And Aaron and I have gone over that as well, so.
Thank you. Linda Metis, 98 Main Street. 2 questions, sir. If we had to replace all of our meters, what would the cost be, even in a general sense?
So I think, have you gone through a meter replacement program in previous communities? I mean, it's a hard thing to say because I don't exactly how many services you
Yeah,
have.
so I mean, I've done it in previous communities, but, I mean, they were larger communities.
Yeah,
The rough number off the top of my head, you're looking for the cost and the labor, you're looking around $1 million probably.
Thank you. As you know, Rockport is a MBTA community town, so says the state. Should we authorize rezoning that brings in hundreds of new construction units? Would new meters have to be synced with old ones? Would that process require replacement of all meters if there was a burst of new construction?
I mean, I don't want to comment on the MBTA piece, but it would, any development or any new larger developments would be coordinated at the time where the town is physically with any meter program.
Yeah, I can answer that too. I'm not gonna get into the MBA portion of it, but any home right now that's being built gets a newer style meter. Our existing system is integrated so that some meters are drive-by and some meters are cellular. We use the same meter company. It's Badger Meter Company. The town's used them for, my understanding is, for at least the last 50 or more years. So the meters from the 1990s are what we call drive-by or AMR, and then the newer meters are cellular, and those are AMI. So as new development happens, or a single-family home is built, or a meter breaks, we replace it with the newer technology.
Okay, thank you very much.
Toby White.
Hi, I'm Ron Labar, 83R Phillips Avenue. Look at the trend lines there. There's a couple of things that are kind of striking. One is the metered consumption. It's remarkable how it kind of goes down and goes up and goes down. Could that be weather related, drought related? Were we running more water because people were watering lawns and things? Does that make sense? I mean, I didn't think back on which years were drought, but does that drive it? It could.
It could be one of the factors. It could be one of the factors.
Okay.
The other factor, we're not 100% sure, but the other factor was, you can see the trend line in '21, how it went up. Was that COVID related with people working from home? Not sure.
Yeah.
I can't answer it directly, but 2023 was a very wet year for the summer, if you remember. Our biggest consumption day on 2023 was actually Memorial Day. Usually it's 4th of July. So that was, to me, an indicator that we had a very wet summer.
Yeah, because otherwise it really doesn't make sense to see that kind of a dive in 2023.
No, it actually concerns me. Well,
I mean,
the
it could be-
regulators like that from a conservation standpoint.
Yeah.
But we're in the only industry that is a double-edged sword, where we're told to tell our consumers to use less, but we still have to run a business, so to speak.
Yeah,
So
no,
it's
yeah.
not an easy industry to deal with.
Yeah, I get it, but that is pretty remarkable. So that's not meters diving like that. It's not meters.
No,
they're much too slow. They move slower than that, and there's so many of them. It can't be.
Yeah, and I think to Aaron's point, you will see effects from drought conditions and other factors, yeah. And COVID happened to change the water consumption quite a bit.
And then do we understand why the raw to fresh water doubled over the last 3 years? Do we have a technology change? Are we doing something different in the water treatment plant than we were a couple years ago? And can you explain that? Because that just jumps out at me.
Yeah, so that number purely is based on it's pure meter data. I know that your process hasn't changed, at least in terms of your grit tanks, right? That hasn't changed in terms of what, the process. I guess you don't necessarily backwash the same amount every year either, right? So there's variations with that.
There can be seasonal conditions that require
More backwash.
more backwashing.
Yeah.
And it could vary based on not technically weather, but there could be conditions for whatever reason that that trigger the raw water for.
But it's like this, and then it doubles like this for 3 years, so that just tells me something changed. But, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, I don't have enough, again, I agree with you.
Yeah.
I think one of the interesting pieces after listening to some of this explanation was the different programs that the town has in place right now, and all the little places you can think of that these little knife cuts, if you will, happen. One of them is the replacement of the lateral connections. I think you said there were 17 found water main issues. So
We
as the town catches up-
had 16 service leaks that we found in 2023, calendar year 2023.
And what was the year before that?
It was like 4.
So the difference there, the connection of all of a sudden now we have captured usage versus non-captured usage, all these little things. And so the movement in the direction of the replacing of the lateral lines, that's, to me, huge. That's all of a
Yeah.
sudden there's water that we've captured. And I think the next conversation is what else can we do? And I think as the commissioners make recommendations, talk to the DPW about implementing a better or more robust meter replacement program, that's on us to do.
So I guess just to follow up with Patrick, those 16 water service leaks that we found, we're not allowed under the regulations for the annual statistical report, because we can't quantify it. Even though we know it happened, we're not allowed to quantify it and count for it. So there's another reason unaccounted for water can be higher, because of the way the regulations are set up. I gotta follow the rules. That's what it comes down to,
To be clear, by the state.
by the state.
Okay.
Yeah. So I can tell them that we found the leak
Right.
and we repaired it, but I can't account for that water because I have no way to, I don't know how long it occurred for, and I don't know how to quantify it. I estimated a quantity, but I'm not allowed to count the quantity.
It's still great information to have.
Correct.
But, yeah.
One other piece of this too on water usage, getting back to your question, is that since COVID, we've also had a lot of Airbnbs in Rockport, and we don't really have a mechanism to track those. And think about an Airbnb, you're on vacation, there could be 6 people, 8 people in a house. How many showers a day are they taking? So the water consumption for those types of buildings or dwellings is increasing our water usage as well. So that's another piece of the puzzle here that really doesn't have a good answer. Not yet, Toby Debst.
Laura Evans, 77 High Street. I wonder if you could give us some more specifics on the leak detection program, what's being done and what the status is with that.
So we've done an internal leak detection program. We have equipment that we use. We go out and we isolate areas. So again, I've been here for 2 years, but I'm still learning the system. Obviously, it takes a number of years to really get integrated into the system. I have depended on previous operators, their I guess institutional knowledge to know when they feel that there's an issue. So when we feel we're losing water at night, we monitor. We have 3 water tanks. We have South End, Pools Hill, and Pigeon Landmark Lane. If we see a noticeable loss in a tank overnight that they felt is not normal, then we would try to go to that area and perform leak detection. They haven't had an official yearly program here. The last time they hired a company outside of the town was 2019. I do want to get back to try to building into the budget to be able to have that type of company come in and look at it, and that's something I'm moving towards. But we do an internal program, and like I said, we found 16 leaks last year in '23. So it's not like they can't find them, but I still would like to get another outside set of eyes on the system.
Could I follow up on something?
And I
Well,
think, just to
Toby gets
clarify, if you meant mechanically, how do they do it? Is that somewhat of what you were asking?
No, it was,
Okay.
it was the
Okay.
program, what process is in
Okay.
place for detecting.
Toby Arsenian, 95 Granite Street. Two things. Is the use of water for putting out fires or spraying down the bonfire on the 4th, is that included in municipal use?
That would be fire use.
It would be part of the estimated municipal use.
Yeah.
Municipal?
Yes.
Okay, that's legit.
Anything that's consumed in the community.
Okay, that's legit. The billing of it, as I've said before, is not. No one would conceivably begrudge an ounce or a gallon of it to the fire department, for putting out fires, or for the 4th, which is, bread and roses and a festival. But, that should not be billed to the Water Enterprise Fund. That should all be billed to the town of Rockport. It's for everyone's benefit, not for the benefit of particular people as your water use or my water use. And maybe this is relevant and maybe it's not, although Dawn was speaking about drought years and how those affected the overall performance. Do we have any sense of how much of the water is used outside for watering lawns, gardens, plants, as opposed to inside? And does that matter?
No.
We don't look at that way, but it would be very difficult. Not everybody has an irrigation meter, so we wouldn't be able to separate that use. Some people choose to have an irrigation meter, some people don't. So therefore, to estimate the exact amount of water that's used outside would be very difficult.
Dawn, can I just follow up on, or stay with the subject for a moment of leak detection? Because there's, at one point, I know as a property owner, we received a letter indicating that you may have a leak on a piece of property that had more than one unit. And so there's a piece, there's a responsibility on homeowners. If we receive information from the town that indicates that we have leaks, there's ways to try to address that. And of course, then we benefit as homeowners, because if we find where those leaks are, and these leaking toilets and faucets and such, it's amazing how much water can be wasted in 1 year for those types of things. So if you want to comment, I don't know much about that program. I know I received a letter a number of years ago, and maybe that could be part of the whole effort.
So I should clarify, there's two types of leaks.
Okay.
There's a type of leak that happens that your meter is seeing it,
Right.
and we're notifying you. The leaks that I have been speaking about are the leaks that don't go through a meter, that aren't being tracked. So I should clarify that.
So, okay, but while we're talking about it, I know that people get busy, and you may receive those letters, and you do have an incentive to do something to address them, but I'd be curious, and no answer required here, but, how many of us fail to sort of follow up on that, and maybe that could be something that we could work on and encourage people to do.
Yeah, and the other thing is, as we update, or as we improve our meters or replace our meters, the newer meter technology has what they call better leak detection, because it's tracking it on a daily basis versus us driving by once a month and getting
Right.
and getting
exactly.
that notification.
Don?
Don Sutter, 33 Stratesmith. I guess this looks like a sort of a multi quantification of errors here. I was wondering if it's possible to pick, a sampling of, say, 10 meters that are various ages, run a 55-gallon drum of water through them each and find out whether there's any leakage or not. Is that feasible, or is that a bad idea? You know what I'm saying? So you sort of sample a few and then you throw some water through it, you know the number, and you see if the meter works or not.
We did some of that as well. So yeah, there are ways to do that, to test the meters, and we did test probably a dozen. We focused on the larger water users because there's your chance for greater loss, I guess. Typically use what they call an ultrasonic meter, where they strap it on and it's a fairly accurate meter. So, and we'll continue. I think we've talked about continuing to do that specifically at the water plant to try to get some better numbers. So, yeah, we do. We have reports. Well, so that's where the American Water Works has a passing threshold that is 3% wide. So 100% obviously is your meter's perfect. Anything less than 98.5% accurate or reading greater than 101.5 accurate fails technically. We saw some that were close to that and some that weren't close to that. So the idea being, is there any major flags here with some of the larger water users? And I think it's part of the problem, but I also don't know if the particular users we looked at, would move the needle, so to speak, so much. So yeah, you can test meters. It's a common practice, and we did that to some scale just to get a sense. So, yeah.
Yeah, Z. Suppler. Aaron, you just brought up something that fascinated me. And that was that you said you've been here about 2 years. I can tell you maybe about 15 or 20 years ago, we had a town-wide water ban and no hoses at all. The Flat Ledge Quarry, I think, was down around 45 feet or something like that. And the soil in my yard was just like a dust bowl, a Nebraska dust bowl of the 1930s. You were only allowed to take like 5-gallon buckets, fill them up at your hose, and take them out to your tomato plants. And the soil was so dry, it just, shed right off. So that brought me to a thought that, do you have records going back, or could you have records going forward in the event of these Dust Bowl years, that you can actually make a guess as to how much goes towards landscaping purposes as opposed to, normal human consumption for drinking and bathing and stuff like that? In other words, there would be a clear definition when you had a total outside water ban, and that would give you an idea of who is using water for, grass and that type of thing. So I'm not saying that we need a big brother, but it might not be a bad idea.
Well, I know from working in other communities, and I've come from other communities that had bans every year because they were in a stressed water system. It's without having the every home metered so that you can track outside water. People do what they do. Just because there's a ban doesn't mean people follow the rules. I just know from my years of experience that it just doesn't work that way. I don't think you can.
Thanks.
Toby, then we're going to move on to the storage system next. Unless,
Nope.
Toby Arsenian, rates aren't the consultant's concern, but they're very much your concern. And you, Bruce, at one point said that you were interested in considering variable rates for those, charging those who used very large amounts more. Could the consultant, having experience of many communities, tell us how common is such a system? Do other communities do that? How many? And what effect do they get out of it, if you have any thoughts on the subject?
well, before you start, I would say this, that we have another study ongoing now that we will be getting some results back from in the not-too-distant future. And it will be something we'll look at before we implement the rates for the following year. So it's coming.
Yeah, I've seen communities have tiered rates. Usually they have a more variable water user system, so there's larger water users, commercial, industrial. That's typically when I'd see that. A community like Rockport, I think, is fairly homogeneous, I guess, in terms of water usage, but. I don't-
Manchester, so I'm gonna use Manchester.
Okay.
Manchester has a tiered system.
Yep.
They have an extreme tiered system. They have 3 or 4 tiers, and people that use a lot of water, that 4th tier, that's an expensive tier.
Mm.
Is that advantageous to them, to your knowledge?
Based on, again, to me, it is advantageous because it allows people that want to be want to conserve water to control their destiny for their bills a little better, and then people that have the disposable income can consume what they want.
It reminds me of the pay-as-you-go system with trash,
Similar.
really, it's very similar.
Similar.
Right, yeah.
Sorry, one more question. Denise Donnelly, 72 Pigeon Hill Street. Is there a process for appealing to the DEP to increase the WMA maximum withdrawal amount?
Yes and no. So yes and no. What they're going to tell us first is they're going to tell us to look at, like Bob has already said, they're going to tell us to try to look at your leaks, try to look at your meters, do all that first, and then if things don't improve, then they would look to say, okay, you would be proposing to increase your withdrawal,
Right,
or look for a new source.
right. Yeah, it's,
If you, correct me if you think.
no, I think you're
said that a
100%
little
correct. And they look at your water supply and whether your water supply, there's certain, as Aaron said, there's stressed watersheds. Ipswich River watershed is a stressed. So they would look at all facets of it before they'd, in my opinion, would agree. And it can be a tedious process. So yes and no, I think, is the answer. Sorry.
Yeah, that's a good question. So how are the, what do we call them? On the first graph, how are those arrived at by DEP? The permit max?
That was
What's
just,
the
that was established through our safe yield, I assume.
Yeah.
Years and years ago.
Yeah.
And then on top of that, so we have a permit, it goes for so many years,
Right.
and then that permit establishes that allowable max.
Okay, so at the end of that term for that particular permit, do they reevaluate things, or do they just stick with the same?
They reevaluate, usually it stays the same, but what's happening now is they're trying to reduce you, not increase you.
Okay, because what I was gonna ask is, what is that based on? What's the permit? You know, like if you're, say you had a 5-year permit or something, and then DEP, you come to the end of that, what are the factors in a community that they're looking at to say, well, this one should, well, like you said, they're looking all across the board to decrease?
It's
But-
usually, there's a lot of factors, I don't have them
Okay.
off the top of my
No,
head,
right, not-
but there's, how much growth,
Yeah.
potential growth,
That's what I'm
Um,
assuming,
yeah.
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 Okay, increase in population, increase
But then
in-
they're also looking at water efficiency, because the industry's gotten more efficient.
Okay.
All the appliances and the fixtures have gotten all more efficient, so there's a mass balance, so to speak.
Right. Yeah.
There's a number of factors, and I don't know them
I'm
all off.
sure,
Yeah,
yeah, I'm just trying to educate myself, so.
We did try to, I think, as a matter of fact, I think Rockport and Manchester have the same Water Management Act withdrawal number. And
yes.
it sounds odd because it's like, how could it be that exact? But
I know.
it was established a while ago when the town probably looked a little different. But as Aaron said, conservation methods and it seem to be more of a practice now. And so it is a bit of a balance here. So you'd have to demonstrate likely through increased population or something like that to
Yeah.
try to change. And your watershed would have to be able to bear it as well.
Yes.
So,
Yeah.
because it's one thing to say we're just going to up it, but do you have
Right.
it? Right. So,
Do you have it?
yeah, and some don't, and that's the challenge. So, I know that like MWRA spills water annually. They have such a large watershed. It's just so they're looking for customers, but
Oh, that's true.
it's different. Yeah.
I know I said we were gonna move on to onto the sewer system now, but one thing I've learned through this process, which I found interesting, and especially with the zoning that's in front of us, is that, well, Aaron and Bob have said the same number. The state looks at about 65 gallons per person per day for water. So you can kind of do the math and figure this out. So if you get 100 units with 2 people in them, you can kind of determine what the water usage would be going forward. And it's interesting, so. 65 gallons per person per day.
Yeah.
All right, Bob, why don't we go to the text subject?
Okay, all right. So the next slide is sort of there's a lot of things going on there. We tried to make it as straightforward as possible, but there was a lot of information. Is a summary of your wastewater collection system and things happening at the plant. So I'm going to need to lean in here because my glasses are at home. It's probably better if I look at this one, actually. So we have much like the water system, the town collects wastewater flow data, really at the wastewater plant. And so a lot of our analyses was revolved around that data that's available. And we've been to the plant a bunch of times and gotten intimate with the plant and know the process fairly well. And so in a collection system, so in a water system, water leaves the water system, you don't want it to, right? In a drinking water system, you want to keep the water in the pipe so it can serve the customers. In a wastewater system, as it ages, it starts to accept water through cracks and old infrastructure, so it's kind of working in the opposite. And for the same reasons, it's a bad thing, because groundwater or flow that isn't pure wastewater gets into it. So that's the other side of the table. Let's see, so just to kind of run through what's established there. Much like your water system, you have a permit limit on what you can discharge for wastewater. Oh, thank you. Oh, these are great. All right.
Watch out, he's
So-
going home with them.
I might go home with these, I know. So the DEP sets your discharge permit as well, so they only allow you to discharge so much. Again, it's permit driven, and it has a lot to do with similar factors, population, treatment plant capacity, all that's established based on very specifics of the town. So your discharge permit is 0.8 MGD or 800,000 gallons a year, okay? When you start to get to 80% of that, which is in the 0.64, 0.65, the regulators get a little curious, I guess, and as you would as an owner of a collection system, about why we're getting to that level of our discharge permit. And 9.5 times out of 10, it's infiltration and inflow, which maybe you've heard of, maybe you haven't. So Rockport is an older system, much like many communities in Massachusetts. And over time, it degrades and water gets in. You guys know better than I do. There's probably a lot of sump pumps. It's Rockport for a reason. It's much rock. Rock doesn't allow water to infiltrate, so it kind of follows, in many cases, pipe trenches. They probably blasted rock to put sewers in at one point. Water loves to just migrate there, and unfortunately, it can get into sewer pipes. So the regulatory side is very consistent. We tried to break this out the best we could to sort of track what's been happening in the collection system. So just to follow left to right here, the ACOP line is an administrative consent order that the town has, meaning Mass DEP stepped in and said, you're likely experiencing too much I&I, infiltration and inflow. You need to do something about it, and that's a regulatory requirement to do it. So now it's an action. And so that period between the two pink lines was when you had the administrative order, and specifically when new connections to the sewer system were not allowed. Because they're saying you can't handle it, you can't accommodate it, you can't do it. It was lifted in, it looks like January of 2011. And so we wanted to just capture that to see what the impacts were. Did it help? Did it not? The other thing that we tried to capture here is the town has performed rehabilitation of its sewer system, and that's what those gray bars are. So wherever you see those gray bars, the town has invested in, usually it's lining sewer pipes so that you keep things from getting in. So you've done work, and we also wanted to see how that impacted the performance and really the flows. The orange, well, let me start with the green line. The green line is the 12-month rolling average, and that's what the town reports to DEP and what DEP watches quite heavily. So they want to make sure that you're staying below that threshold, Aaron, on a 12-month rolling average. So you can see your discharge limit. You can see where the green was above that, and then it sort of started to dive a little bit. And much like the water system, seasonal conditions have a big factor here. So if you get a really wet season, you're likely to see more flow in your wastewater system, which lines up very well in Rockport, unfortunately. When you have a lot of rain, you see a lot of flow. So we're comfortable with that. The largest issue you're facing on your wastewater collection system is the quantity of infiltration and inflow within it. And that's stormwater, essentially. It doesn't need to be treated to that degree anyway. And what it does is it chews up capacity at your plant and your pump stations and all that. When that happens, if you've exceeded capacity of your collection system, it starts to leave the system, and it could leave through manholes into the streets, it could be into basements, and that's a violation. It's called a sanitary sewer overflow. It's a violation. And you're supposed to report those. Every time that happens, you have to report it to the state, and then there's a notification process, and you're a coastal community, so you're trying to protect your receiving waters and beautiful beaches. The last line on there is sort of a trend line, and that was something that the advisory board asked us to add on there, just to kind of get a general sense as to what is the trends. So it had dropped, and it's kind of going back up again. It really does strain not only your collection system, your pump stations, because everything's working more, it's wearing more, it's using more energy to power these systems, but it's also potentially creating overflow situations that you'd be violating certainly health code, but Mass DEP standards. You can't have those. Rockport has a very significant amount of I&I that enters its wastewater collection system. So out of the water and the wastewater side, the wastewater side is fairly straightforward and easy, because all you have to do is look at some meter data. You don't need to be an engineer, certainly, to look at that and be like, okay, yeah, it's raining, and we've looked at it 3 ways from Sunday. It's rainfall getting into your system. Could be from sump pumps. I have sump pumps at my house. I don't put them in the sewer system, but I have them. I know what it's like to have water in the basement, and it can be stressful, so I have them. It's tough to keep those separated, although Mass DEP actually thought that your ordinance was quite impressive, and they were very pleased with that. So I think that was an outcome of one of the administrative orders that you had. So I think the town's done a nice job with enforcement. It's hard to keep those out. The other part is, when it rains, you know better than I do, it really doesn't have anywhere to go but to get into rock, and it follows the path of least resistance, which is sometimes these sewer trenches that have been cut into rock and that have stone trenches that just make a really nice place for water to migrate. And it's, we broke this out because we had a fair amount of data. I know the town's been working very hard, or has been working to try to mitigate some of that, and it's tough to do. We've had a lot of data to support it, but there's some instances where the majority of the water in the sewer pipe is infiltration, or it's not wastewater. So I think the easy recommendation here is, and unfortunately all these older systems, and it's everywhere, require maintenance, and it requires funding to mitigate it. And so the recommendation here is before you would consider whether it be increasing your discharge limit or trying to increase the capacity of your wastewater plant, it would be to try to mitigate the infiltration and inflow, which again is something that you've done sparingly, but I think a concentrated effort in doing that is necessary to get this under wraps. And it's you're never going to get all of it. It's just not, if anybody gets all of it, it'd be the first time ever. I think you're trying to stay ahead of it as much as you can. And manage it enough where you're staying compliant. You are, in doing so, you're preserving your infrastructure, very expensive infrastructure. And it's just it's something that most cities and towns in the Commonwealth are dealing with. Having an ongoing, robust program is important. So I'm not sure if this particular figure demonstrates it. We've looked at this 100 ways, but in seeing what worked, what didn't work, but it's clear that this year, and Aaron and I have been throughout the system, and we've seen situations where it's very obvious that there's excessive I&I getting into the system, and DEP has standards 4,000 GPDIM, which is kind of an old metric, but it's something that they use. Again, a lot of that data is included in the memo as well. It's just even specific parts of the town that have been broken out in previous studies and how much they have. Typically, it's older sections of towns that suffer from it, sometimes coastal. But the wastewater side's certainly more straightforward for us looking at this. I think there's still some unknowns on how you're losing water, and I think that's something that Aaron's and the town's committed to looking at. But wastewater is pretty obvious, really.
Can you, before we open up for questions, could you just remind us, so our capacity or our limit is 800,000 gallons.
Yeah, your discharge permit is for 800,000 gallons a year. Your wastewater plant
Design.
has a capacity for 1.2 million gallons.
And on the busiest day of July 4th or Memorial Day, what are we running at?
You're probably running in the $400,000, $500,000
I wish.
gallons a day range. Yeah.
You're saying without rain?
Without rain.
Without
it's-
rain.
Yeah.
So assuming that those people are here in the summer, it's really not raining hard. I think I'm just trying to make it clear that our system is robust enough to support wastewater. Our system is not robust enough to support the rainfall through infiltration
That's
through
right.
pipes.
Right.
Correct.
Okay.
Your dry weather flows are very typical and great. It's when you have the rainfall, and again, you're right. I mean, it's interesting because when your population seemingly goes up twofold in the summertime, is when your wastewater flows are generally the lowest because you're not in the wet weather seasons. So if you could, and obviously this year it's been wet and it shows. It affects the process at the plant. It has issues. It can cause problems. So.
Thanks, Bruce. Denise Donnelly, 72 Pigeon Hill Street. A couple things. The town is going to allocate almost $1 million from the ARPA money toward I&I this coming year. So that's good news. And
It's already going to be awarded.
What's that?
We've already bid the project. It's going to be awarded.
Oh, fantastic. Excellent.
I'm just trying to get the recommendations through.
Cool.
So, sorry to interrupt you.
No, good. And then I know we got $950,000 from Congressman Moulton's office. Is that also going to be going toward I&I, or what's the?
We have so many priority needs. It may, but my gut's telling me I'm going to need to put some money into the actual treatment plant. Our infrastructure has so many needs.
Yep. Yep.
But you have the treatment plant, then you have your collection system pipes. They both need needs. They both have needs.
Yep.
And then same thing on the water side. Our treatment plant, one of them was built in 1938.
Yeah.
The other one was built.
Pretty cool.
The other one that we call new was built in 1996 or 1998. It's not new anymore.
Yeah.
And then obviously our water pipes.
Yeah.
We have major needs for water main replacement. So
Yep.
it's actually kind of can be overwhelming sometimes. The amount of needs that we have to try to bring our infrastructure back to somewhat more manageable.
I had just one last question, if I might. There's an untapped wellhead over by the train station, and I'm just wondering, thinking about making supply available, would it be possible to tap that wellhead and direct that supply toward the wastewater treatment plant and free up supply for residences and businesses?
When you say wellhead, you mean, you mean drinking water, correct?
Well, I understand the quality isn't great.
Yes.
at
We
that
don't,
well.
we have a permitted,
Right.
we have a permitted wellhead there. We would use it if we had to. It does have high iron content, so we don't use it, normally.
Yeah.
Because it degrades the quality of water
Oh,
that we
okay.
put out of the plant. But I don't know how that would affect the wastewater plant. I wasn't following you.
Well, just because there's the backwash that you talked about that goes, that comes as a result of processing the wastewater, would it, it's a theoretical question,
The
probably.
the
don't need to-
backwash that he was talking about is part of the plant, the water
Oh, I
treatment
see.
Water
plant
treatment plant, yes.
process.
Yeah.
Okay,
So
Yeah.
there's really no way to separate that,
I
so to
see.
speak.
okay.
Yep.
Thank you.
Quick question, Don Souther, 33 Straightsmith. This, I assume, also includes wastewater from residents and
Yes.
businesses, correct?
Yes.
Is there any analysis, or can we derive anything from how many more houses we could build, or how many more residents we could have, based upon?
Right now,
Based upon this data?
None.
Does that tell us anything about how many more, I don't know?
Units.
It's-
well, unfortunately, the way I look at it is, I have to look at it at worst case scenario under wet weather conditions.
Okay.
So under wet weather conditions, we have zero capacity.
Right, and that's what, to your point, under dry conditions.
Well, I would agree with Aaron. In certain rain events, you have zero capacity in your system. It's completely inundated with water.
And so we solve for the worst case, is that what we're doing here? Or-
Well, I mean, I know it's not gonna rain all the time, but how do
I'm asking you, I don't know.
how do we keep on
Yeah.
adding, how do we keep on adding to the system
Yeah.
when we have conditions that we can't handle now? So until we get II under control, how do we add to the system?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
I got a quick entertaining story, which is somewhat horrible, that just recently happened.
Hold on.
Sorry. This one? At one of our pump stations in town here, weigh stations. Aaron and I were called down to one of our pump stations. We had a leak in a wall, which was dividing the wet well with the pump side of the water. I stood under this water for a portion of time during a heavy rainstorm. This was clear, crystal clear water coming from our wet well, which was our sanitary well, flowing through a crack in the wall into our dry well. This was crystal clear. The funny part of this is that one of our wastewater guys went and tasted it. We didn't realize this was coming from the sanitary side of the well until we put two and two together. He said it tasted like clear, perfect water. That's how much water was in that waste side of the well during that recent rainstorm.
Wow.
It was crystal clear, and he tasted it, and it tasted like water, so.
Good. Oh, my gosh.
Bold.
Just to put a little.
Don't recommend that.
Yeah, yeah.
It's
Wow.
comical, but horrifying at the same time.
Right.
I mean, it was
Yeah.
crystal clear.
Yeah, Z. Sepler again. Many times as I've gone to those DPW commissioners and heard about I&I, I've still got a guess as to what is inflow and what is infiltration. Infiltration is stuff that's coming through the pipes by natural causes, and inflow is stuff that people illegally have hooked up rain gutters and stuff into their sewage system. Is that correct?
Pretty much.
And, okay, thanks. So, the town continuously, over the course of, Christ's sakes, I think it's 50 years, has been putting forth money to do repairs to the public part of the system, the pipes. So Dock Square and all of those other places are, the pipes are patched up and presumably are, made leak-proof. But as far as I can remember, you've always said that one of the problems you have is that you can't do anything about the pipes that are on private property. So that if they're putting in 2,000 gallons of rainwater, it just goes down inside their pipe and comes into yours. And the question I have about all of the studies and stuff being done is, have you ever tried to make an estimate, or could you make an estimate of what is actually attributable to the inflow that you can't do anything about presently, and the infiltration which you've been working on diligently for 50 years, so that the more and more, what I'm driving at is that more and more and more and more and more we keep paying for the inflow and stuff, but the infiltration might be getting worse all the time for all we know, and there's not much you can do about it. So I'm just questioning if there's any kind of analysis that you can do in that regard.
Yeah, I mean, I know that you guys recently completed a smoke testing program, correct?
Yes.
So smoke testing programs will intend to identify those inflow sources. So what you do is you actually interject smoke into a sewer system, and you see where it migrates. Sometimes it comes out of a catch basin, you know the catch basin's connected. So that is a fairly typical process. And the town just did that not that long ago, right? To try to identify the inflow sources, which when you look at flow rates, and if it's here and then it climbs quickly, you can usually attribute it to inflow because it's a direct hit. Infiltration usually takes a little bit longer to kind of get into the system, and then it starts to go up. So you can see it on a graph, and you can see it, or you can identify it through a smoke testing program, say, and there's other ways to do it. So the town has taken measures to try to identify those.
Yeah, and we based on that report, we've got to find the funding mechanism to then now chase those issues down. Because it's great that you have the information, but you have to figure out how it's connected, and you need the funding source to be able to rectify those issues.
Toby?
Toby Arsenian, 95 Granite. Mr. Parsons spoke about checking out the older portions of the town sewer system. It's divided into districts, which the commissioners are probably familiar with, and nobody else. Those are just for mapping purposes and for the testing. But one of the districts that has been repeatedly fixed in quotes, and I'm not sneering at you guys, is over there towards Old Garden Beach. That was fixed once. I believe it's been fixed in the process. No? Okay, that's good. And one of the ones that is currently defective, as my understanding, is Marmion Way. And that was one that was built privately. The commissioners had, I was told, to say yes to it. It was not built by the town of Rockport, or rather it was not financed by the town of Rockport. That was done at the behest of the people who lived in that neighborhood. And at the time, being the one person who vehemently objected to the whole scheme, I was told that the commissioners had no right to say no. If they met the technical physical standards for the construction of the system, that the commissioners had to sign off on it. To your knowledge, is that correct? And is it still correct? Because you're dealing with all of the logistical, technical parts of it, but there is also out there, like all of the bureaucratic horrors of the permits, there are the legalities of it. Who can connect under what circumstances? And if you can tie in a whole long road, half a mile or more, without the town being able to say no, then you're in, it's very hard, let's put it mildly, it's very hard to make any sorts of plans. If, for instance, with the zoning that nobody wants to talk about, up there on Great Hill, somebody came in and launched a great development and decided they would do the sewer at their expense, could the town say no to it? I've been trying to get answers out of the majesties, that's the selectmen, with no success, and troubled you with my concerns also. All of it needs to be spelled out, the legalities of who can say no under what circumstances. It's as much part of the picture as the logistics and the permitting.
Well, I'll do the best I can to answer some of that. I think the DPW has a lot of control in the development of a housing project. There's some differences if they're already on a sewer line versus if they're outside of the zone. But if they're outside of the zone, we can say no to it. If it's in the zone, then I think we have some other ways that we can regulate the growth so that it matches the growth of our capacities within our systems. So I think we, as a body, do have controls over the growth of these developments.
I hope you're right. I'm skeptical.
No.
Tom?
So, Tom Meekus, 73 Marmion Way, and Vice Chair of Planning Board. I mentioned a deep dive that I took into the 2022 report from Tetra Tech, and I prepared a presentation that I gave to the Planning Board and to the Ad hoc Water Committee, concluding with some possible solutions to the limitations on water and wastewater capacity. And DPW is pursuing some of those solutions, but there are others that are kind of not yet in the cards. And I think there's a lot that could be done to allow growth and capacity, some of which relates to even the planning for high-density developments can be done to be much more efficient on the use of water and wastewater. So if you want to see some of those solutions, I've got my presentation posted on the Planning Board webpage, and Rob has a copy of it, and it looks like this. But I do want to take issue to one thing that Bob said as a solution. He mentioned increasing the capacity of the treatment plant, the wastewater treatment plant. I think that is totally unnecessary, because if you look at the monthly average data,
I said not to. I
He
said
said
not to.
they never allowed
to.
it.
Yeah, I said not to
never said
increase.
that.
Yeah, yeah. I agree with you. I would
We
never.
agree with you on
Yeah,
that.
yeah.
The DEP would never
Sorry.
allow us
Yeah.
to
So,
increase the capacity,
yeah,
ever.
yeah.
They
It's-
would laugh at us.
it has a much higher capacity than it required right now. It's on a monthly average basis, it handles about twice the discharge permit. So everybody who's gone around saying we might need to build a new plant or increase the plant, forget about it.
All right.
Forget about it.
We don't.
Agreed. Yeah,
We
agreed.
agree.
Yeah.
Paul?
Paul Sutter, 41 Granite Street. I got two questions, wastewater and clean water. Clean water, the water from the plant, how does it get to the towers? Is it a dedicated service or a dedicated line or through town distribution lines?
So I don't know exactly how from the plant to the towers.
It's all the same lines.
Yeah, it's
There's no dedicated line to the towers.
So it's
Because-
distribution?
Because we pump during the day, we shut off at night, and we run off our towers at night.
Wastewater, is it possible to test the pump station for salt water?
Yes.
Yes.
Because if salt water, if you could isolate that, that would be Back Beach or Dock Square.
Poten-
But Back Beach,
There's potential salinity issues, and we're gonna be looking at that.
Right.
that's
Yep.
it?
Yep.
And just to give you a caveat to that, one thing I did look at is tides, but the one thing I did look at is that you get very extreme high tides in the summer when you don't get rain, and we don't see the amount of flow at the plant at the summers. Granted, we may get the rain in the summer, but we don't get the storm surges. But so there may be a connection, salinity connection, but we have to research that further.
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, thank you again, Linda Meditz, 98 Main Street. Bear with me in my ignorance. The rezoning question via the MBTA, it has to be discussed. It's being voted on Monday night. And so one plank of this program is by right construction. And so we've also heard that the town is not categorically required to provide answers on water sewer before this vote on Monday night has many of us very concerned. And so, Mr. Reed, when you say that new development can be declined if the sewer system is outside of our main body, How would that interface with by right construction if we pass this act? Thank you.
So the codes say that if someone builds and they're on the storage system, then by rights they have the ability to tie into the storage system. However, if they buy a build on a property that is not adjacent to the storage system, then they have no rights to tie into the sewer system. So we would just not issue a permit for that to happen. That part's simple. The part that is not as simple is if they are on the sewer line and they wanted to build a big, we would have to work at controlling that growth. And that's when I would say, you know, maybe it would be through, you could do 10 units a year or so. And that would be something that we need to work with. And Toby's right, that is something that we would need to work with our attorneys on. But I've done some work on this already, and it appears that we have controls to do some of that work so that we can, you know, we can't just say, no, you can't develop, but we can control the development to make it fit with our capacities of water and sewer.
Toby Arsenian. Thank you, Bruce, for doing that. That's a good start. I think it all needs to be spelled out. It needs to be, you know, for each possible scenario with connections, who, you know, is entitled to say yes or to say no, under what circumstances, and it's of sufficient importance, you know, that you, the commissioners, should twist arms with the town administrator and their majesties and get it spelled out in writing by town council, you know, with citations out of law. So it isn't a matter of, you know, what Mitch Vieira told you or, you know, what you heard from some state official over the telephone or anything of that sort, so that it's there for reference purposes and we all know exactly, you know, what might happen in different circumstances. And I you know, I'm half blind and have trouble reading that, but one thing I think would be helpful to have on it, which I believe are not there, are the cases in which there have been bypasses. I believe there have been over the years. Mr. Parsons referred to cases where, you know, sewage came welling up out of manholes. I was unaware of such. I don't know if such things happen, but there have been bypasses, and certainly those are violations of state law, have to be reported, and would lead you to believe that the capacity is not as favorable as some people, the planning board would lead you to believe. So could we have those? And also I think it would be really helpful and instructive to know what the physical circumstances, the weather, were that led to those bypasses, because those are the worst case scenarios. And, you know, whether or not you would include the disaster at Dock Square, I don't know. Was that triggered by weather, or did that just, you know, a bolt from the blue occur? I don't know. But definitely those should be on the charts and are definitely also part of any calculations you make.
Thank you. Well, I think we've been, let me get back to my mic here. We've been talking about this for a couple of hours now, or close to hour and a half. So I think pretty much you know what we know now. And I hope this is helpful to those of you who have come today. And Bob, thank you. Appreciate your
Yeah, my
time
pleasure. Thank you. Thank you for having me.
with that. So, Melissa?
So, no, the next step with this,
Well, I think we've got a couple of
Just,
steps coming up. I
okay.
mean, you know, there's still work being done. So there will ultimately be some point when we're, get a finished report.
okay.
I think the next big thing that everyone should be interested in is what's happening with the water rate study. And that will be in May. That will be,
Should be May, yes.
we'll have that in May, and we'll be able to talk about that and looking at what that would do.
You get set rates.
You know,
for
we
next fiscal year.
have to set rates for next fiscal year, so we would like to, if it makes sense to this group, to possibly do that and make it a tiered rate. And what that would do, from my estimation, is that it would make life easier for those of us that don't use a lot of water. And for those that use a lot of water, they'll pay more than we do. So the rates would vary depending on the usage of water. With high water usage, would pay a higher price. So that, when we haven't seen it yet completed, so when we get it, we'll have another meeting like this so that people can see how this new water rate would work.
Bruce, will these 3 slides be posted to the site and available for the public?
Sure, we can do
Which
that.
site?
The DPW site?
Yes.
Yes, we can certainly do that.
So Bruce, you did mention that Manchester by the Sea does have a tiered water rate system. So you could go up to that town hall and get some information from their DPW or something to see essentially what the system does.
We have a,
Rate-wise and stuff.
right, we have a consulting firm that is the largest in the country at doing rates, working with us on this. So the proposal that they will present to us would be similar to a lot of systems. So you can, but we'll have it for you.
Will they also be looking into the connection fees? I think that's.
Yes, they will.
Thank you.
So one thing, I don't know if we've mentioned this or not, but if there was a 100-unit development in town, and they had 2 bedrooms, that would be about $550,000 that they would owe the town for licensing for I&I, is the way it works now. Because the number, I believe, is $2,750 per
Bedroom.
I&I connection, correct? I got it right here.
Yes, it is.
Granite Crossing paid just over 90,000, I know.
That's right.
Correct. It was per bedroom,
Uh-huh.
yes. And they had, I think it was, I'm going off the top of my head, I think they had 31 or 33 bedrooms total for the entire property.
Sounds about right, yeah. 23 units.
Yeah, so it's late in the day, but I think what I have here is that it'd be for I&I for, 200 unit or 100 unit with 200 bedrooms, it'd be $550,000.
Well, to set it in perspective, you need to look at that against what we have been spending for I&I, over the past 5 years and out the next 5 years.
Correct. But we are having that, we will have some information on what the rate should be.
Good.
So, hearing nothing else?
Did we want to look at our schedule
Oh.
and figure out what we're going to do? Because, so we'll have a public hearing about the rates. Is that June or
It's usually, I'd have to double check, but I think it's late May usually.
late May?
We have to
Okay.
set it, you guys need to set the rate prior to July 1st, obviously.
Okay, all right, so that's
The billing can go out.
okay. So we should probably meet in May.
Yeah, how about May 7th? What if I got something here? What have I got?
It's- I would-
How about you? What?
How about if I've got a doctor's appointment and I'm not sure what that means right now.
Okay,
How about May 14th?
that's okay with me. How about you, Pat? May 14th?
Yep.
Yeah,
You okay? Okay, so May 14th? Yeah. Great. Okay,
Okay, so we'll get that set.
same time, same channel?
Yes, same time, same channel.
Yep,
And you're all welcome.
right, and we might bring chocolates next time.
do adjourn.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes, I'd like to make a motion to adjourn.
I second that.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Again, thank you all.